Well, welcome everyone to the podcast. It's great to be here. Great to be here with Benjamin. Thank you all for listening. We're here to encourage people to become their best selves so they might in turn bring out the best in others. And today's topic is gratitude. It's November, Gratitude November, a great month to step back and take a look at what's going on around us. And today we'll talk about gratitude, some hints, suggestions on if you don't have it, how to find it, how to expand it. And we'll also talk a little bit at the end briefly about where the podcast is and where we're going to take it to. Great. So the intention of today's discussion is to maybe provide a little spark within everyone listening to take a minute to reflect back on what's happening in their life, and really, to drill down to the smallest of things to be grateful for. Oftentimes we're looking for the big, the wows, an amazing this, that, or the other thing. I don't really even want to list anything because, one person's level of gratitude is very different from another's. For some people, they're grateful for, waking up, opening their eyes, taking a breath. And maybe that's as far as it goes, but you have to start someplace. And when you start to build on those basics, then you can start to expand and find other things to be grateful for, whether within yourself or with other things that others are giving you that you can be grateful for. Looking through some notes and things, gratitude is really perspective. We've talked about this before. It's also mindset. And when you look at gratitude from the standpoint of perspective requires perseverance and perspiration. It's not necessarily easy. I feel extremely fortunate, grateful that throughout my life, I've always had a sense of gratitude. It's natural for me. It's not something I have to seek. I like to be grateful for anything that's happening in life. I really like to identify when somebody has done something to be grateful for, to say thank you to them, so that they can realize that they've done something deserving of gratitude.
The quote, we just kind of glanced over it. Gratitude is
perspective
and
requires perseverance and perspiration.
That's pretty good. I think that's an easy one to just glance over.
And I must admit, I don't know where I got that from. I can't take credit for it. It came from somebody else. Yeah. So rather than spending time necessarily talking about things that I'm particularly grateful for, I thought we'd spend some time jumping into what stands in the way of people finding gratitude. Something else that I saw, hard times. Hard times aren't given to us necessarily to break us, but to build us up. And, looking at it from that perspective, if you can be grateful for anything that comes your way that you might, with the wrong perspective or mindset, see as a defeat, it's really an opportunity to grow. So, who stands in the way of you recognizing gratitude? Others might stand in the way. Past or current relationships might stand in the way. Probably the biggest defender or enemy to gratitude is the inner critic. So many times you think about your mind and where is that inner critic and what are they saying? And, it's always there. It's either a whisper or it's a voice yelling at you. It's uninvited, and it's just a constant feed of negative thoughts, telling you things like, you can't do that. you can't talk to people. You can't get up and get going. You haven't exercised in 6 weeks, and now tomorrow you're going to start exercising. And then when you wake up that next morning, you're not awake yet. You're not going to exercise. You're not going to lose any weight. There's so many ways that the inner critic is just constantly bombarding you. So how do you then control that voice? Because it can be controlled. It's kind of like it's a relationship, and you have a relationship with someone, and you decide how that is. How does that go? We teach people how to treat us, and you can teach your inner critic how to treat you. It's not easy. It takes a lot of work, and it comes from taking that. I got some great notes from some tips from Mike Foster. He's an author. He wrote a book called Primal Questions. I'd recommend that book, and him doing some research on him. So he talks about the inner critic, and that our minds are designed for creativity and imagination. They're wired to dream and explore and create, and especially when we're younger. It's always there, I think, but stronger probably when we're younger. It gets dubbed down from things that are distracting us in life later on. And the thing about it is your inner critic starts to come in, and it corrupts that whole pattern of creativity and dreaming and exploring. You can't jump that puddle, and maybe the other, in addition to the inner critic, you have the outer critics, who are people telling you, gee, I don't think you should do that. That doesn't seem like a good idea. People who are trying to, keep you safe, let's say, from whatever perspective that might be. So in your inner critic, you've got things like your inner critic is going to tell you you'll always mess up. You can't do this. You can't succeed. You're going to fail. You've always failed anytime you've tried anything. And maybe the inner critic has some good intentions of protecting you. And then it just develops into this. I mean, you've seen the scenes on movies or things, with the good and the bad on either side. And, how are you going to be grateful if you've got this inner critic that's just constantly bombarding you? So you got to manage this voice inside. He talks about taking the things that the inner critic says, like, I always fail at this, I never get this right, and changing that. Those are extreme situations. The word never, always, those are extreme situations. And turn those questions into statements, and make those statements, like, how could you ever think you'd succeed, to you can't succeed. And now you change that to, I have succeeded in the past. I have been able to do things in the past. I can do this going forward. I know that I can accomplish this. And if I don't accomplish all of it, I've done a little bit to gain me some track record to keep moving forward. So I think there's a lot to be said for training the inner critic to shift from that sense of sort of despair to, if you can then institute some gratitude, you've got a firmer foundation for when that critic comes around.
Yeah. I think everything is a sports analogy.
Yeah.
But you have movement patterns that you want to be able to do for whatever sport you're doing. And the best way to be able to do the movement pattern that you're trying to do, whether it's throw the ball faster, more accurately, or spin and flip this way, or, do this movement sequence, or be faster, whatever it is to break it down and to do it slow, in parts, repetitively. And I think about your brain is just patterns that, sequences that just run, on a 24-hour loop or a year loop. Oh, it's daylight savings time again. What a bummer. These things that are just cyclical and running all the time behind the scenes, even subconsciously. You mess up, you say, "Oh, you idiot," like we all do that. We all have that. If you don't have that reaction, then maybe you don't have an inner critic, but we all probably do. So you have to figure out, like, okay, what or what brain patterns do I like and what brain patterns do I not like? Where am I strong and how can I continue to do that? And where am I weak? And, I'd like to change that. And if you've just, to me, that's like stepping on the mats, or, stepping into the arena, is saying like, okay, I'm going to change the way my brain thinks after 33 years of this patterning, even just in one area, not everything, but just in one area around money or around fitness or nutrition or my relationship with my spouse or whatever it is. I'm going to change this one area, and I'm going to focus on this one thought that I keep having about it. And I'm going to erase and replace. I'm going to take, every time I hear this in my head, oh, my spouse is so this, and it makes me miserable. 2, I'm gonna, the bold, you have the bracelet, and when you have this negative thought, you switch it from one wrist to the other, and you say the opposite thought. So whatever your trigger is, you have this thought about your spouse. My spouse is, let's say, lazy, and therefore I'm miserable. To my spouse is focused on other things than me, and I will support them however I can. And you erase and replace. And then it's like, you say it once, it's not true. You say it twice, you're barely believing it. You say it 100 times, then it starts to show up naturally. You might still have the thought, you might still get triggered in the way that, certain things will bring that up. And I think that it's, that your mind is like a garden, and if you're just starting to think about this, if you're just starting to say like, okay, I'm going to fix my mind, I'm going to start working on it, not fix it completely, but start working on it. You've walked into a derelict garden that's been left for 50 years or 30 years or whatever. And maybe some areas are pretty just naturally, but everything else is roots and weeds and vines, and stuff is collapsing, fences are falling in, and you just have to go a little bit at a time and work your way around the garden. You can't demo the whole thing. Your brain doesn't work like that. And once you make one area beautiful, Jordan Peterson talks about that, clean up your room, like make one area of your house beautiful, the rest of it will stick out like a sore thumb. So if I work on one area of my life, what if it's fit my mindset around fitness or my mindset around my marriage or whatever, and then I kind of have some success there, I'm going to look at the way I treat money or business or family or any other area of my life and go like, wow, this is like really toxic, the way that I talk to myself about this area. And I think when we think about stuff like this mindset, it's like, it's such a big thing, but it's like, the elephant, you just one bite at a time.
Yeah, it's small little pieces.
Yeah. And it's consistency over time too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think, and seasons where, oh my gosh, 22-year-old Benjamin was so focused on mindset and new information to reprogram my brain from whatever I'd picked up along the way for probably 2 or 3 years. And then I just kind of coasted with what I got because it was working much better than what I had before. And then you hit new obstacles, new challenges, marriage, kids, whatever. And you're like, okay, here's a whole new area, or here's a whole new reason I need to kind of do an overhaul. Or you've let the garden, get a little wild again, and you need to, trim it back and get back to work.
So be grateful for those seasons. You can find yourself in a good place, in a season, and then all of a sudden realize, oh, geez, leaves are falling, and I gotta switch gears here, and new opportunity. It's always an opportunity for growth. Doesn't matter the age or the circumstance, and it's painful, very painful sometimes to recognize that, embrace it, and take action. It's very, very challenging. You mentioned daylight savings time. Oh, gee, that means it's going to be an hour more darkness tomorrow. And, it's only a month and a half until that turns around. So just look at it from that perspective. We changed the clocks this past Sunday. On December 21st, it's the solstice, 21st or 22nd, I can never remember. It's
21st.
21st solstice. So the days will start to get longer from then. It won't be much, but it'll be minutes at a time, and suddenly, gradually, and then suddenly, we've got lighter afternoons. The sun's higher and makes an impact.
Right.
Something to look forward to.
Right. I am the first to complain about it being dark, and I always tell people, in Maine, it's not the cold that'll kill you; it's the dark. When people are like, "What's it like living up there with snow?" and I'm like, easy. If the sun was up at 6 and set at 8 p.m., you wouldn't even notice. It's the dark that gets to you. And I think in the last few years, and I mean, maybe 3 times out of 10, I still complain about it. However, in the last few years, I have really taken the approach of seeing winter and darkness as like the season portion, as just, this is a season where I'm going to focus on other things, indoor activities, or getting more rest, like literally hibernating in a not in a depression way, but in a like, summer is exhausting, and I am often at the end of summer like ready to be done with being outside, feeling like you're just going 7 days a week. So it's an opportunity to focus on other things. And I think anything in life has seasons or perspectives where if you just swap out the lens, it's like it's blurry or dark or whatever. You swap the lens, you reframe something, and it's like, okay, this is actually a good thing. Like, oh, when it's dark out, we don't spend money. We blow money in the summer like you wouldn't believe. Okay, well, here's an opportunity where I can work the same amount or more and save some more money, so that in the summer when I'm bleeding money, I'm not, oh my gosh, what are we doing? It's like, okay, I sowed seeds in the fall and the winter, and now it's, springtime time to.
There's a scale almost, and it's a balance. Balance isn't the right word, and maybe scale isn't the best analogy. You've got what you have and what you could have. You have this. You also have this. So I am, let's see, go back to the darkness. I'm exhausted because it's 3:30 and it's dark out, in January. And yet I've got from 3:30 until I go to bed, 8 o'clock or so, to find something to do. And maybe it's just rest, or maybe I pick up a new hobby that I wouldn't do in the summertime because it's inside. And it may be a hobby I do with somebody else. So I am exhausted because it's January, but I also am doing this project that's going to get me to the next 2 months. It's going to take me to finish it. So it's a focus, and it's something that's going to, I'm going to benefit from, and probably somebody else is going to benefit from as well.
Right.
But it is that reframe, like you say, of taking what you see and turning itself on its head to some extent to say, oh, there's another side to this coin.
Right. I think you have to sit with certain things too. We're talking about like inconvenient circumstances. We're not talking about cancer. We're not talking about death. We're not talking about betrayal, all these things that like hardly can be understood or reframed. They can be reframed, but that's like, to me, that's like Jedi reframing. That's Jedi perspective. That person that is able to do that has devoted their life, or in a wild circumstance, tragedy or whatever, has been forced to adapt and overcome or crumble under it, which, having never been through any of that, I don't even talk about that stuff. But people do it. So, and I think when we first started talking, the first thing that I think about when I think about gratitude, next layer to that is perspective, which is what gratitude is, change in perspective or a better perspective, is we're all comparing what we're feeling on the inside to what everyone else has going on the outside, which is a bold law. Don't compare your insides to other people's outsides. And the other thing is, you only have one experience, which is your life, and how you experience your life compared to how you see other people's lives, how you perceive other people's lives. So we live in this very distorted looking glass type reality, if you can even call it that, because it's all subjective. There's nothing objective about what we almost nothing objective about what we experience internally. And so I think it's really important to remember that, for me, I feel like I've never faced anything tragic. I mean, I have like had blips of tragedy or frustration or whatever here and there, but what you have to remember is the hardest thing you've ever experienced is the hardest thing you've ever experienced. And for someone else who you see blasting through life with tons of tragedy, tons of starting at a very tough starting block, way behind, or whatever, setbacks, family situation, you name it, and they're just crushing it. Well, that's what their experience is. The only thing, they don't have your easy experience to compare it to. So I think it's important to remember, like, one, give yourself some grace, but on the other hand, like, hey, you might have it easier than a lot of people. So, and a lot of people are crushing it in whatever way they want to. Family, it doesn't have to be specific, and they've had some tough spots or tough start. And so it's like, okay, well, there's kind of no excuse, because if you can be, I watched this video the other day. I nearly threw my phone out the window after I watched it. It was this guy who was, and I don't know how true this is, I think it's true, was born and put in an iron lung shortly after. I think it was for polio, or back then they did
Probably,
that.
yeah.
And most of those people died like shortly after. This guy lived to be like 60s or 70s, maybe even older. And I mean, he's in an iron lung. He can't.
Until his 60s?
Yeah, he's in this iron lung his whole life. He can't move anything but his head and neck. He's using a paintbrush to paint, using a stick in his mouth to type. He gets his law degree. He did all these things, and all he can do is this. And he wrote some books and stuff, and I didn't get any complaining from that. I got the very opposite. And it made me want to chuck my phone and be like, I was freaked out. I was like, how am I complaining about literally anything in my life? Because it's just people go through such hard stuff and still find ways to be grateful, joyful, friendly, kind. People that have faced massive betrayal still learn how to forgive and move on. I got zero to complain about. And if you're listening and you're kind of on the verge of well, I got this thing going on, it's like, okay, well, do a little research, Google these people, YouTube these people that are no limbs, no this, no that, you name it, whatever, tragedy, blah, blah, blah. And they're out there at least making the effort to have a positive impact and be great and start from gratitude. And anytime I do that, I'm like, okay, I gotta just shut up and get back to it.
And those people have so much gratitude for what we think is so little. So little. There's a new movie, wrestling, there's a new movie coming out about wrestling, and it's based on a true story about a kid who only had one leg. I mean, I think it was stumped from knee down. He lost from knee down, and he became a collegiate wrestler. Amazing story. And, thinking about, so that guy in the iron lung, or somebody like that, paraplegic, who gets their law degree, is a painter, author, whatever it happens to be, speaker, just living. They get to live. And I think that's the thing to focus on, is what I get to do. The hard things, those are the best that you get to do. I get it. I get to get up this morning as opposed to staying in bed. I get to exercise because I'm physically capable of doing that. I get to sit here and talk with you. This is no pain to me at all, obviously, but the things that you get to do when you start building on the gets, you start to build a pretty big bank account of what you get to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can start to shift from, why do I have to do this, to I get to do this. Why do I have to go see so-and-so? I get to go see so-and-so. Why is the person that I'm working with so difficult? Well, I get to have an impact on this person that I'm working with. Why is my sibling or someone in my close family acting this way? Well, I get to sit down and talk to them. Actually, I get to sit down and listen to them. And I can potentially help them find where they need to go. So it's get to, I think, is probably a better way to look at things than I have to.
Mm.
We've heard that a lot. And I think, part of being grateful, opening up to gratitude, I think you can help, thinking about kids primarily, young kids, teaching them how to say thank you is the beginning of them learning to understand gratitude and how to receive and deal with gratitude or thanks when some praise, I guess, is what I'm thinking about. There's, I think, please and thank yous, basic things that are often overlooked that go so far. I mean, I remember being a kid and one of the neighbors older than I was, he was just the most polite guy. He always said thank you, always please.
Who was that?
Tom Fault.
Mm.
Yep, one of the Fault boys. And I just listened to him and said, I want to be like that. Clear spoken, but mostly just grateful. Thank you, please. And, when you teach that to a child, they start to learn what it feels like for them to say thank you to someone. And when you teach them that in addition to saying thank you, you're also learning a bit of humility. Because how I tell you how I thank you for doing something might be far more, and how you respond might be far more than you would in a different circumstance. Like we're talking and, geez, Benjamin, that was amazing. What you did with those photos the other day, that house was absolutely incredible. The way it popped, the family's so happy. It looks just fabulous. And if somebody else gave you that compliment, the best thing to say is thank you. Because you don't know where their frame of reference comes from or anything like that. And if you went on to say, well, I did this and I did that and that, then it becomes kind of self-serving in, dealing with that compliment when thank you is a complete sentence, period at the end. And teaching kids that, I think, will help, them to develop their sense of gratitude.
Yeah. Kids are so cool because they're just mirrors. I think about, how do you teach a kid gratitude? We've been talking about this with our daughter, and not teaching her gratitude, but teaching her how to operate in different situations. And we've said a lot, like, she's just going to do whatever we do, if we're on our phone all the time, she's going to want to be on our phone all the time. And you talked about, like, it's the law of the picture from John Maxwell. People do what people see. And you just did what Tom Fault did. You saw that. You're like, that's better than that. I know in my head, it's like clear. I'm going to do that. Then you do that. And then I grow up and I say, okay, well, he's like this. This person's like that. I like my dad. I don't like that. I'm going to do that. Which I very well could have been like, I see it as this, and gone in the opposite direction. And I have in some areas from your parents, like, it's natural. You're going to, like, even if it's a noble trait, you might be like, that's not me. You might not identify with that. But if you identify with it, like you did with Tom and I did with you, then that becomes, that's what you do, and that becomes who you are. And then, my daughter will watch me and Mariana, and she will do what we do. And if I'm polite or I'm upset all the time, she will be polite or upset all the time, depending on what I do. And then we've talked about this before, but the number of things in my life that I'm like rapidly trying to eliminate and rapidly trying to increase if it's positive is all because I'm like, this can't exist because she's going to pick up on it and do it. Or I need this to exist in my life because I need her to see it to be part of her early childhood, which is so formative, and then it'll be naturally a part of her.
Yeah. The gift of parenting, self improvement and growth from parenting is just amazing. It is exactly what you said. It's the opportunity to be the best that you can possibly be for this little developing person.
Yeah. Totally.
Mm. Back to scratching your way to gratitude. I think in preparation for this and just in general, when you think about seeking gratitude, I think so much about the people who have circumstances, addictions, someone who's has an addiction to something, and the inner critic that exists in that environment has got to be so difficult. And you just, it's that whole thing of, I'm just going to use alcohol. I haven't had a drink for 10 seconds. That's a win. I haven't thought about drinking for 10 seconds. Then it goes to maybe a minute. And then you just build that to it's day by day.
Mm-hmm.
But it's minute by minute, I think, throughout an alcoholic's lifetime, because that disease is always there. Those are the people that I would love for them to, really dig down deep and just find that little ounce that exists inside of themselves that says, I did this for as long as I did it. I can do it more. I can find my way out of this, and I can find the happiness that I'm after. And maybe it's not happiness in the beginning. Maybe it's something else, but find a way out. Mm.
Mm. Yeah. What's a great like workout routine for gratitude? Like let's talk about in a day and then in a week, and maybe let's talk in a day and a week, because that's how you would.
Yeah.
If you get more specific than that, it doesn't really help.
I think everybody's routine is different. When you wake up in the morning, first thing to do is find some piece of gratitude. And it could be I get to get out of bed. I get to wake up.
So just say it, think it.
Think it. Yeah, it's in your mind. I mean, you can say it out loud if you want to. And then build on those, if you can. I highly recommend that you write down 5 to 10 things that you're grateful for every day. Write them, and I would suggest you write them in the morning so you have them to think about throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, you can review those. When I go to bed, I lay in bed, and in addition to saying prayers, I'm going to do sort of a gap and gain on what my day was like, and where did I gain, what were the gaps that I could improve upon. And I'm grateful for any of the gains. I'm grateful for the gaps, because I could do that better tomorrow or another time when I do it. I think it's constant though, and you develop these patterns, these ways of mapping it out, so to speak. And then it's like you talked earlier, it's the brain rewiring to put gratitude at the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Well, I mean, I think if you write down a few things you're grateful for every morning, you're like, so that to me is, if you consistently do that or even start doing that, that is going to be crazy impactful. I have done it in seasons. I don't do it every day. I know you're very, very consistent. That's like something that I think if you can be consistent with something like that, you're going to unlock so much. it's very convicting to think about, like, oh my gosh.
I haven't always been consistent about that. Give yourself
Right.
a little grace.
Right. And I know. I'm just saying, like, that's North Star. Like, don't compare yourself to that.
Right.
Try and get there over time. But like,
Right.
hey, like the first thing you said was wake up and think a grateful thought.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's like that is hard to do and so easy to do compared to what we're talking about with 10 things every morning for a decade. You know, it's like that's a life changed will do something like that. We do before we go to bed. Oftentimes, we'll say peach and pit, and your peach, your I always say pit and peach because I don't want to hear the negative thing after you've already said the thing you're grateful for was good. But we share a pit, which was something that we thought didn't go well. Which some days there's nothing to say there. Um, and then your peach is like, what was the best part of your day? And it could be right now when we're just laying here talking to each other, or, um, you know, this happened with our daughter, or, you know, at work, this success, or someone was nice here, or whatever. It's just a good thing. But yeah, always share the pit first, because in the past we've done the peach, and then you hear the pit, and you're like, what's another peach?
It's kind of like gratitude.
Totally.
The perspective of, don't find the negative, find the positive. So,
Right,
but
right.
you do need to.
I think you need to acknowledge what
Yes.
frustrated you, because if you don't acknowledge it and you bury it, and that's you talked about addiction. That's all that is like trying to get rid of the yucky feeling, you know. And if you don't talk about it to someone or even just yourself, I mean, out loud, whatever, however you get it out, you know, it's going to stew, and then whatever happens tomorrow is going to be sitting on top of that, and it's just a pile of trash piling up in your brain and your heart. And so you got to get it out. And then it's amazing how much more energy is spent verbally processing the pit. It's like, and then this happened, and it was terrible because of the, you know, there's like all these words, but then it's gone. Like it's like this little rock that takes forever to get out, but then it's gone. And then you talk about the peach, and you're like, yeah, and then this person was nice to me today, and it felt good. The end. And it's like, it takes no energy to talk about it, and it kind of boosts but it's amazing how much like releasing that burden or that like frustration is so much more intensive and high in energy cost, and then it's like gone, you know?
Yeah, I'm not scientific enough to know or to even state. What little I know is when you say, when your mind is in a gratitude state or saying something in gratitude, the chemicals in your brain are all the chemicals that you want for production and furthering you on. Right. When you're in negative speech, the inner critic voice is, overwhelming and taking over, or even just, popping in.
Yeah.
There's the bad juices,
right.
Developing.
Well, think about the difference between the amount of effort you'll put in on a project you believe in, whether it's like some organization that you're like fired up about, like Midcoast Youth Center or something. You're like, oh my gosh, like we're doing this, we're gonna put so much energy into it, so excited, yeah. And then you have to do something for something that you don't believe in, and you're like, this is for this organization or person or even myself is probably a better example, because like it doesn't really matter if I do it. I could do this other thing, and it's like miserable. I got to scrape and clean my gutters. I'm like, yeah, that does not sound fun. That to me is like,
and when you clean your gutters, they're clean.
Right,
you're grateful.
Right, totally. But what I'm saying is like, if you can, thinking about the analogy of like, if you can approach something with gratitude, it's going to feel like you're working for Midcoast Youth Center. If you approach something with complaining attitude, it's going to feel like you're cleaning the gutters. Could be the same task. But to your point, yeah, like what is the cleaning your gutters thing, and how do you apply gratitude before you do it? Like, I have gutters to clean. How many people would kill to have gutters to clean?
Yeah. Good perspective. So back to the, how do you formulate ways for gratitude to develop it? I think about putting it on a calendar. I mean, some people who are calendar driven, you put on your calendar during the day, today's my 5 minutes of gratitude.
Set an alarm.
Set an alarm. And you might include in that gratitude some time to today, or one day a week, or every day in the week, or whatever it is, that I'm going to call somebody and be great to pass gratitude on to them. I'm grateful that you're in my life. We did that in bold. That was a great exercise. Tearful exercise. Can be very emotional when you drill it down to I'm taking an intention and I'm making it an action, and I'm deliberately telling somebody how much they mean to me because I haven't done it for so long, or even I haven't done it since this morning. Doesn't matter. So you could do that. You could also put a Post-it note. Some people will put a Post-it note up on the mirror because you're going to see that during the day. You might, if you read a book, your bookmark is a place where you put a little note of gratitude, or maybe it's a little note in your book and you write grateful things on it. There's countless ways to do it. It depends on who you are and how you kind of operate. And if you have, if none of those seem to be an option, then again, you just go back to, you think it.
I think there's,
I think, therefore I am.
Yeah. I think there's might be getting a little too in the weeds here, but it's worth talking about. But there's a 80-20 principle on gratitude too, where it's like, where are the areas that if I applied even just a little bit of gratitude in my life, it would have a massive impact. I could be grateful and I could make, a few more dollars. Well, whatever, and I could come home from work or finish work and immediately go and express some gratitude to my spouse for taking care of my child, or also working, picking up the kids, whatever, anything. That would have a massive impact on my marriage, which has a massive impact on my life. And it's a positive feedback loop versus, some other way I could have gratitude that, like, I could be grateful for my vehicles. Okay, cool, great, awesome, do that also. But look for the little, like, hidden areas where if I apply some gratitude, it's like rocket fuel. I think that I remember listening to, I think it was Jay Papasan or Gary or someone was talking about coming home from work and like they would go straight into like a bedtime routine or whatever, and they were like, what's the one thing such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or necessary? And their thing was, when I get home, I'm going to go straight to my spouse, which I still don't do this every time. However, it is an amazing thing to do. Go straight to my spouse, give them a hug, kiss, and say, I'm so grateful for you and all that you've done today. And it's like, that is going to have a massive impact on your life. There's a few other things you could do, etc. Find them, do them.
Yeah. It's the doing, it's back to that intention that John Maxwell, intentions are great. They require action. And that's the whole piece of it. Take the action.
Yeah. And you said you like to express gratitude to other people because of how it makes you feel and how it makes them feel. Me laying in bed and being grateful for my family is awesome. And I should do that. I should also do what you're talking about, which is tell those people, I'm so grateful for you, because then I'm doing it again, which is good for me. And it's amazing for them to hear that. I think sometimes I think when I think of gratitude, I'm like, oh yeah, me thinking it, me journaling it. I think less about it of like showing it and telling and reaching out, and like that's a much more powerful exercise in addition.
Yeah. And I believe people are gratified by sharing gratitude. They who wouldn't feel good about somebody saying thank you? Some people are suspicious, so you have to have some trust there, or maybe that's earned over time. Yeah, as you teach people, well, technically, when you're giving gratitude to someone, you're teaching them potentially how to give that to someone else. And I know that's some rocket fuel for some people, especially the people that aren't accustomed to it at all, to realize that, yeah, I can give somebody praise.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a terrible thing. So let's shift gears just a minute, and we'll come back to this as we wrap up. I'd love to talk a little bit about the podcast and where we are and where we want to go with it. And so kind of kicking that, it'll be a brief discussion. What are some topics that listeners might like to hear? And, they could get in touch with us, let us know what those are. We'll make ways available in the notes below. But, I'd really like to know what people would like to hear more of. We've got actually gratitude. If you look back, we did another gratitude about a year and a half ago. I did listen to that again. Another good example of gratitude. And then who are some guests that listeners might like to hear from? And send us along, and maybe it's somebody that that you think others might benefit from hearing from. Maybe it's just a suggestion that we might go to that person and ask them. And would people be interested in sending in some questions? And we might do a Q&A sometime to people's questions.
That'd be awesome.
I think that would be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if it's like random.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be like,
I'd love to be random. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, we haven't recorded for a while, and I've had on the top of my podcast note random thoughts that I've just keep filtering in there because,
well, we could do that.
We could do
that too.
We could we could do random thoughts.
We could do a 2-minute drills.
Yeah.
where you have 2 minutes to talk about that random thought that whatever. Anyway.
Yeah. You have any other thoughts about where we're at and where we're going?
No, I think it's a habit to record and have the studio set up and clean and not my video gear all over the place. I am grateful for the time because we get to spend it together. Like, I don't think I have to record a podcast today is like the worst way to think about it. It's not that. That's a flashing thought sometimes of like, okay, it's more like I've got a podcast to record today. It's in my schedule. I have to edit a podcast. That might be a little bit more of an opportunity for me to clean the gutters. But that being said, it's really good for me and you to do this, and I think it's good. We've had a lot of positive feedback. I think it has an impact on people. I know people that listen to it. It's like bringing my daughter to see my grandparents. I'm like, this is a beautiful thing for her and for them, and I should do it more. And that's how I feel about this. So the more that we hear from people, the more that people engage and share it and comment or email us back and say that was such a great episode or whatever, the more we want to do it. Not because it's stroking our egos. There is an element of, okay, this is working, it feels good. If we're not having an impact, we should be channeling our energy into something else. So the more people respond and share and whatever, that to me is just fuel for our fire to get in here and get guests in here. And so that to me is my thinking around it, I guess. It's also a seasonal. It's interesting. I know some podcasts have seasons. They're like the season 3 of whatever, and they record from this time to this time. Our season, as it appears in the last year or two of doing this, is after summer to summer, basically. Not that we can't record in the summer. It's just requires more discipline during that time of year. Like I said about the seasons, it's getting dark, it's getting whatever. This is a great time to record podcasts because after, it's light out right now, but after 4 p.m., it's dark. Well, I still got an hour of work or first thing in the morning or whatever. So, I'm grateful for people that listen and people that engage and would love to see more of it.
And I think what I just like to reemphasize is that we're not looking for people to pat us on the back.
Totally. I don't even like that.
Yeah.
It's awkward.
We don't need the,
yeah.
We're looking for how to engage people more.
Right.
How do we bring more hope and a
Right.
future
And
to
people raising their hand and saying, I am listening. Even if it was a criticism, I would take that in a heartbeat. Like, hey, I'm listening. Can you do it shorter? Can you do it longer? Can you have this person on? Can you stop having these types of people on? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
To me, that feedback is super helpful to make it better, because then it will have more of an impact on more people. And yeah, that's it.
Well, I said I wouldn't jump into my own gratitude. I will, as you say, I am so grateful that, as our seasons of father-son relationship, as we go through those, our time together is more limited with other people around. And this is a chance for you and I to spend some real
Totally
good time.
Of course, I can't just let you ever mic drop. I was thinking about.
Not sure I was completely finished, but go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
No,
Well, it's related. It's
yeah.
I have, like, our daughter is old enough that she wants her own space, and sometimes I like want to hug her or whatever, and she'll be like, "Get away," and I'm like, "Oh," like that. Those gaps get longer and longer. And I was thinking the other day, I like showed up at the house and you gave me a hug, and I was like, I used to think you were hugging me to let me know that you loved me, and now I know you're selfishly hugging me. And like, it's both, but like, I'm going up to my daughter to get a hug for me and to let her know I love her. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to hug my parents like double as much, because I feel so bad that, like, if at any point I like didn't even just let them love me, So I'm super grateful for my family below and above. Family can be very complicated, and some people have really terrible families, and that breaks my heart. And I have a really great family, and I'm super grateful for that, and I don't take it for granted.
And could those people that don't have a great family build a family?
Totally.
Create the elements that make a family.
Some of the best dads I know are people that had terrible dads.
Yeah. And someone who, doesn't have a mom or dad who are, around or whatever, build a group of, 5 people. That's the average of who you are, is the 5 people that you hang around with, and build a group that's all trying to seek gratitude, seek growth, how to move the needle, how to be the one that breaks out of whatever cycle you've been in. So I'm grateful for you, Benjamin. I love you very much. You're a great dad. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Dad. Love you.
Love you.